Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that break. So now we're joined by Investopedia interns, who are Anna, Igor, Robin, and Thomas. Team, you will have 10 minutes to complete your presentation. If you go over these 10 minutes, I will have to cut you off. Our judges will then have 20 minutes of Q&A. I'll start the timer when the first person begins speaking. Good luck.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having us today. We are Team Investopedia Interns, and we are here to show you today how Boen and Pension can pioneer not only the Dutch, but also the global pensions industry. Currently, we face an ultra-low yield environment, which is only made worse by the fact that there are no best practice CDCs to look for, and that we're undertaking a highly complex 6-company merger. In this environment, it is extremely important to focus on consistency of outcome for our plan members. And as you can see, this will also be built into our contribution rate and solidarity reserve decisions. For investments, we suggest a 3-stage strategy where we start fairly conservative and then build on more risk over time as internal capabilities and external conditions improve. For example, as we get more experience with investing, as the solidarity reserve grows in size, and as existing DB guarantees gradually are outphased. This will lead us to a final stage with expected returns of 5.6%, a Sharpe ratio of 0.57, but most importantly, that more than 97% of our plan members end up having a good retirement.
Thank you, Robin. So allow me to paint a picture for you. Income from bonds, especially developed market bonds, has been a bedrock of pension investing. However, years of declining bond yields have made it far harder for funds to buy an income for their plan members. And this is regardless of the pension scheme that they may subscribe to. If you look at these selected market economies, the evidence is clear. We are in a protracted low yield environment combined with inflationary trends. We believe that this gives cause to rethink and challenge status quo of investing. In fact, our analysis leads us to believe that pension schemes anchored in liability-driven DM bond investing is not feasible to generate the most returns any longer. If we go to the next slide, our analysis finds that pension design can actually seek returns by challenging status quo in asset allocation. So in the search for fixed income returns, Boen needs to look beyond industry standard exposure to bonds in the pursuit of alpha. So if we look at the 10-year forecast, it highlights that there is a significant yield spread between DM bonds and other asset classes and the opportunity sets within these classes. So what we want to convey is that simply going beyond the idea of annuity pools, we find other agile ways to boost fixed income yields in these low yield environments in the pursuit of offering these sound and satisfactory benefits for Boeing members.
Moreover, when implementing a merger, there are risks which are important to mitigate. More importantly, we need to use this merger as a blank slate of opportunities. Having the main focus in mind, our plan members, it is crucial to first succeed with a smooth integration of the merger before achieving any long-term success. And despite these challenges, we see opportunities which we will later elaborate on in our strategy.
Yeah. So in order to construct a successful CDC pension plan, we must learn from how and why the existing pension plans have failed to provide consistent results in volatile low return markets. So to illustrate this, let me introduce you to Finn. Finn is a construction worker and he is about to retire. And we will consider 2 isolated scenarios where Finn has been part of either a DB plan or a DC plan. And we see that in the DB plan, Finn actually risks losing all of his retirement savings if his employer goes bankrupt. Moreover, as Finn's employer is the one managing the retirement savings while also facing high administration costs, the investments are likely to be too risk averse in order to even generate adequate returns in this low yield environment. On the other hand, in the DC plan, Finn has the freedom to invest his retirement savings as an individual, and he chooses to invest in return-seeking assets, keeping his contribution low. However, this exposes him to great vulnerability to market crashes. So, to sum up, in order to create a model which succeeds in providing consistent results under these market conditions, we need to rethink how the risk is delegated in a pension plan. And based on these insights, we would like to propose our 3-stage strategy composed of stage A, B, and C. Oh, Robin, you're muted.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so for our calculations, we've been using the forward-looking assumptions from the Council for Return Expectations, and we've supplemented this with the insights from Deloitte and BlackRock, which is used for our investment theses and the ESG repricing phase. We've assumed that the companies lack internal investment capabilities and that existing DB guarantees amount to almost 5 billion euros being paid out annually, or about 1.6% of total assets, which serve as a form of lower bound for our portfolio returns. We also see a strong culture for paying a high contribution rate in the Netherlands, and we believe, based on behavioral economics, that this is easier to maintain than to raise at a later point. So to make sure that we reach our target without taking excessive risk, we suggest only lowering the contribution rate by 2.5%. As for the solidarity reserve, we have created 2 rules for contribution and 3 for withdrawal, as well as something that we call the reserve index, which allows soon to retire members to withdraw more than others. As you can see on the top right, this skews the distribution of outcome to the right and also steepens the curve, meaning a significantly larger amount of our plan members achieve a good retirement.
So stage A is where we lay the foundation, and we recommend that Bowen seeks to develop internal capabilities in order to prepare for an increased exposure to alternative investment in the following stages. Therefore, we propose that they hire a new board member with strong knowledge in active investment. Moreover, as we previously emphasized, Bowen needs to utilize this blank slate created by the merger and establish organizational stability from scratch, which is why we want to implement a brand new ICT system. Regarding the portfolio, the investment strategy will be somewhat passive and conservative in this stage, and due to existing DB guarantees, we seek to maintain a low volatility rate of 6.3%. However, we still recommend Bowen to slightly decrease their bond exposure in exchange for equities, with a particular focus on seeking green premiums, as well as alternative investments. And here we see a great opportunity in taking a strong position in the infrastructure and real estate sector in the Netherlands, most importantly because it creates goodwill with key stakeholder groups.
Thank you, Anna. And the primary objective of stage B is to bridge the gap between our stages by exposing the allocation towards more volatile but also more return-seeking assets. So what we want to do is to translate our green investments into best-in-class ESG principles to avoid stranded assets that do not comply to strengthen ESG demands in the future. Then we want to solidify a higher exposure to alternative assets, especially building capabilities within core products of real estate to take advantage of the present yield spread, but also the annuity-like income streams that are inflation-linked. This will serve as a natural hedge. Furthermore, we believe that the trajectory for living standards are set to increase drastically in the APAC region. We will therefore like to increase the exposure to materials and industrial equities because we believe it's a strong growth case. So on a high-level asset allocation, we will see a greater reduction of DM bonds. I will move over to alternative assets, but we will especially see a shift in the components of equities, where we will increase the exposure to global EM equities, while also exposing the exposure to DM equities. These actions will manage stakeholders by investing directly into opportunity sets and asset classes where our workers, our labor unions are exposed to, and the invested capital will also seek to preserve the planet anchored in strong ESG trend identification. We will see a higher volatility rate, but that's normal because we are taking up more risk and seeking more returns. But we can see on our Sharpe ratio that it actually increases by 10% from the previous phase, which in turn tells us that the extra risk we have taken has a positive impact on our risk-adjusted portfolio and therefore justifying the up-risking.
Lastly, we have stage C, which will determine the long-term strategy depending on organizational culture and management ambitions, as we further need to adjust our incentives. And by now, we have increased our independence and stakeholder reassurance, and therefore we recommend to further increase allocation in alternative investments, especially in private equity and real estate, while also moving towards more internal management. And in addition, we have an uncertain future ahead of us, where different decisions regarding ESG needs to be made. We can either become active owners or engaged owners. So in conclusion, we have now become more independent, but most importantly, created stability and reassurance for our plan members.
Yes, and so But to briefly cover what we've gone over today, we suggest only reducing the contribution rate by 2.5%. We've created a dynamic solidarity reserve. We suggest having a fairly conservative initial investment stage and then gradually taking on more risk. But ultimately, what we achieve is that 97.6% of our plan members achieve a good retirement. And as you can see on the right, that is also the case for our good friend Finn. Thank you so much for listening, and we are now open for Q&A.
Great presentation, team. Thank you. So judges, you know how this works now. Raise your hand and I will call on you for your question. Geraldine, let's start with you.
Thanks for that very good presentation. My question is related to the stranded assets, where you are referring to on slide 11. How did you model or analyze the problems related to stranded assets, and how did you incorporate it then in your final conclusions?
Thank you. I will start off with this question. In our report, we put a great stress on the fact that stranded assets is not something we want to incorporate in our portfolio. And the reason we don't want to do it is because, well, we will end up with non-returns seeking assets. So how will we comply to this statement? Well, we will seek to ensure that our portfolio, both in the specific asset classes, but also in the opportunity sets, will follow the stringent requirements of GRESB, of DGNB, and other certifications that will give us a stamp or certification on the fact that our transition, our green transition, is succeeding and also setting a good example for the future. So we do not end up with assets that are outdated compared to these ESG trend identifications that are very present now, but we think will compound over the years. And that's why we want to stay ahead of the curve now and set us up for success.
Great. Now let's go over to Ono.
Hi guys, wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. I have a question, actually two, about the solidarity reserve. I think you made a very detailed structure for that reserve, and two questions. So one is, what is an excess return in your definition? How do you define that? And how do you invest the reserve? Is that exactly the same portfolio as the rest of the fund, or do you do that? Would you do that in a different way?
So maybe if I can cover that. So what we are doing is we're basing this on the overall company's investment strategy. So you can see on the left, we have incorporated portfolio expectations which align both in stage A, B, and C, C plus then, with our assumptions for the solidarity reserve. And I think what we would consider to be, was the question excess returns or excess risk?
Excess returns. So what in your definition, what is an excess return? When does that?
Yeah, so if I can maybe move into this one. So yeah. I think an excess return would really be something that is not collectively beneficial for our plan members. So we really want to see a situation where, yes, we will be reducing some of the upside for those that are extremely lucky with market conditions. As you can see on the one on the left, it goes further to the right than with our solidarity reserve. But we believe that the important number is essentially how big a percentage of the overall plan members achieve this satisfying retirement rate, which we dubbed above 70%. And we see that to the top right, that our model really thrives and performs well in this regard.
Thank you.
Great. Now, Jean-François.
Thanks, guys. It's a great presentation, and I like the fact that you thought about like the entire process, not just the asset mix, but how it will be implemented over time, and also the impact on fees. Like I looked at the appendix, good analysis there. One question about the internal capabilities. So you and link that with the fees, like you are talking about like the fact that you want to grow that over time. How do you see like the future in terms of like the size of the team, how many people will be needed, and also what kind of asset class will be covered internally, and what will be the impact on the fees on the scheme? Thank you.
So I can kick this off. So it's a good question, because the thing about CDC is it becomes super beneficial because you reduce the fees for the plan members, and we believe the more that we internalize, the more we will reduce the fees. But we also understand that if we want to internalize everything, that will require 500 offices and 5,000 people that are subject matter experts in every asset class. So we want to build our structure so that it has 3 legs. We have the indirect investments, which means that we have an internal team that will seek arbitrage opportunities and where the in-house expertise is not sufficient, and invest in other funds, especially when we move into alternative assets, so such as private equity and real estate and infrastructure, which of course requires deep insights. Then we want to do joint ventures with other pension funds, insurance funds, etc., and find managers who can do those investments that we are not particularly interested in doing or require too many resources. Then the third leg, which is the leg that we want to build, that is the internal investment team or asset management team. And we understand that we cannot reduce the fees to 0%, or at least to the internal fee, but we will try to take as much as we can internally and invest it and deploy the capital. But we believe that if we want to deploy all of this capital that we're getting from our pension members, we also need 3 legs to sit on.
Yes, maybe to very briefly add on, the way you can see this is built into our model is also here on the bottom of the screen. You can see the segmentation of bonds and equities outsourced to external managers, and then the alternative investments. And you can see over all of the phases, the alternative investments, which is by far the most complex and more difficult investment type, will be the one that will essentially make up the majority of our external portfolio managers.
And a further very short add-on to this question is just another point to justify our choice to have a very large proportion of internally managers is that it really enhances the ESG principles, because we try to reduce the length of the investment chains in our investment strategy, such that we get as few agency problems in the whole context. Yeah, and in general, we see that pension funds which have a lot of active investment and internal management are more ESG concerned.
Thank you.
Great, thanks team. Now we'll go over to Stephanie.
Actually, my question is a bit in regard to those different stage. I like the idea that you implemented different stage, because I think it's a bit more realistic to go from point A to point B. This being said, I don't think I've seen a calendar on those different stage, because this would have an impact on your final results also. So how did you model that in terms of getting from stage A to stage C into the end result?
Assumptions fit into those categories, and it's also built on the idea that things take time, but we will be improving gradually. So we thought a 5-year horizon for each of the stages would really be enough for us to do this transition gradually and to build up internal capabilities.
And just to add on that is we don't want to make it too advanced or too complex, because we have just merged 6 different pension funds. So we do need to set the stage in the first, like in stage A, and then increase the level of our complexity, and yeah, to basically add on that on.
Great, thanks team. Next we'll go over to Millen.
Yeah, great job everyone on this. I was fascinated by the dynamic nature of the presentation and the way that you have this transition not only for the organization but also for the portfolio. So you did wonderful on that. One of the things that struck me is that you are at the high end of the contribution rate at 27%. And I think for pensioners, that may be acceptable. But when you look at the portfolio from stage A to stage B, you still have a sizable exposure to fixed income. And that probably explains why the contribution rate still has to be high, because you're not generating the kind of return. And there's a cost benefit analysis consideration there. So walk us through that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I will start off and you can supplement me later. But yeah, we chose a very passive investment strategy in stage A because we simply concluded that there are too many other risks connected to stage A that we need to take care of first. There's the merger potential operational risk that we first need to take hand of. And then we have, at this point of time, we have an empty solidarity reserve that we first need to fill up, which is why we also need a high contribution rate. And then we have these leftover DB guarantees where we need to make sure that we are liquid enough to pay these off. Moreover, we have discussed a lot the fact that we need to create goodwill with the industry, because it might be hard to that we are going from being 6 defined benefit plans to being a CDC. We need to really communicate that to them, and the workers who are consumers in this pension funds are workers in the construction industry, which is usually known for having very strong labor unions. So and they might be skeptic of this transition. So we need to kind of delegate our time to that in the first stage, and then we have built up these internal capabilities. We can, yeah. I think Robin, he has something to add.
Yeah. Sorry. So what I will add about the number itself is that yes, 2.5 might sound like a very pretty number, but what we found based on our simulation was that this was actually sort of a local optimum, at least with this time frame. And you could argue that potentially the contribution rate could go gradually lower over the investment stages. But what we were asked for today is to provide you guys with one number that will be fitting for all of the periods. And we believe that the most important period for this investment strategy is the first one, where you really need to make sure you're not being overconfident, because there's so many things working against you as a company here.
Sorry, can I just ask one follow-up question? Thanks, a great response. Just one thing, when we think of that intergenerational transfer, because you're absolutely right, you want to start off on the right foot, and I'm really impressed by that. But there is a burden that's being placed on the current cohort of workers to pay at this high level, with the future cohort benefiting from that. What would your message be to those workers now, that they're not the one that's paying the price for someone else to reap the benefit in the future?
Yeah, can I maybe add to that? So I would say that currently, actually, while this may paint a picture of us benefiting the existing customers, actually it's the people right now that have the retirement that are being put at a disadvantage, I would say, because there's a lot of things, both in terms of how conservative we have to be in our investment strategy, how small the solidarity reserve is for these few years to come, and then also the fact that we have quite a lot of risk with the existing DB guarantees that we have to adhere to. So we think that we will actually benefit the currently young generation more actually than the people that we see today.
And as well, you can take it into consideration that the Netherlands is known for being a very collectivist country. So I don't like, they will, the word solidarity is not unknown to them. And if we in some way communicate it well to them, I think that it will go through well.
I also think it's important to stress that we really try to make no bias in our design, such that no expectation that some generation will receive a higher increase than others. But in practice, there will be variation in benefit levels, but this will be due to circumstances at the time, such as asset performance, or perhaps we are seeing members' lifespans increase as is also a challenge right now. So we were really trying to integrate that into our model, but also having a profound respect for the intergenerational risk and how we achieve buy-in from our pension members that are younger of age. And we will do that by showing that you will get abnormal returns with this new form of pension scheme, but also that we will reduce your fixed incomes and you will be allowed to pool your funds into a larger pool that will diversify your risk and smoothen the volatility as no other pension scheme can match.
Great. I think we'll move forward on that, team. We'll try and get through the last three, so please keep your answers concise. So Cam, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for a great presentation, and I'll echo the comments before that. It's refreshing to see some consideration about the practical side of things and implementation. So that's great to see. My question were on I have two questions regarding page 9, your slide number 9. I was wondering if in your modeling in Monte Carlo, I assume the y-axis there is the number of paths. You took into account, or did you consider demographic distribution, or it was just life expectancy? That's one question. And my second question is with regards to assumptions that you had for your modeling. I guess you took correlations and returns that you mentioned from Deloitte and so on. Do you have any thoughts about the validity of that kind of assumptions, or within the present context of high valuation of equities and things that were mentioned in the case study?
Yes, I can maybe try and briefly cover some of the stuff. So for the solidarity reserve, allow me to switch slides. So we have built this on an assumption that currently the national age demographic will be sort of constant and will be representative of our workers. So we also use that in calculating this. You can see on the right is essentially the amount of total plan members we have at the different age groups. And while this will potentially vary a little bit, we think that a country such as the Netherlands is one where the age distribution is actually fairly uniform compared to a lot of other places. And then the other question was regards to what, sorry?
The assumptions that you had on correlation and returns. Do you have any thoughts or comments about it in light of the elements that were in the case study about the fact that for example, the returns on equities might be zero and so on and so forth?
So I can maybe kick it off and then another group member can supply. So that's of course something we need to consider, because when we are in a low yield environment, we're seeing so much dry capital being allocated into equities, and we're seeing very high valuations. But I also think our strategy speaks to that, because we are very conservative in our stages, and we have really allowed ourselves for each stage to have a significant proportion of how would you say, a defensive strategy, so that in very agile ways we can shift our investment strategy if the market conditions are changing, which they probably are. Right now we're seeing massive inflation in developed markets and etc. So when we have split it up in stages, it is also to allow for reassessment of each stage to say, okay, is this the right path to go? Because we believe that if we had laid all our eggs in one basket and believed on the assumptions that are given by BlackRock and other institutional investors, then we risk up having Finn without any pension payments once he's retired, because we did not take enough caution into the uncertainty that are present in all of the markets around the world, asset classes and opportunity sets herein.
Thank you, team. Just a quick note, please do not let anyone in the meeting, and also concision in your answers, please. Keith, we'll pass it over to you.
I love the fact that you started at the beginning. So let's go back to these 6 funds. How are they going to, and I'm specifically thinking about the governance side. So you've got 6 boards. Somehow you've got to go to one organization with one board. What's your advice for how that might happen? And what would you see would be great sort of characteristics and attributes of the resulting one board?
So I can maybe have a go at it, and then you can help me with this. So if we begin with having a common goal, and I think we actually have an appendix slide on this, so if you can go there, Robin. But basically, what we need to align in the beginning is where are we heading, and essentially having the same as a goal is to benefit all of the plan members. And I think if we align all the board members on that, and having a conservative strategy moving forward to reduce as much risk as possible, but also the operational side, we will be able to set the long-term direction and gradually building the internal capabilities so that we as might lack at the current stage. Yeah.
What about the skill set of that board? What should they be competent at doing and understanding?
So I think something that we really lack right now is the active investment understanding. So we need to have someone who is really has been there, done that in terms of investing in a larger pension fund or something similar to that. I think leadership and sort of an entrepreneurial spirit is also really important for this board, because they will have to be making a lot of changes and decisions that will be a little bit controversial, I think, to a lot of people. So I think these are great characteristics to look for.
Great. That brings us to the end of our Q&A today. So Investopedia interns, thank you very much for being with us today. We'll be seeing you at the award ceremony at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll now take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll be back for our last presentation from Higher Yield Consulting.
Perfect. Thank you.